Okay, so look, first, thank you so much for allowing me some time today to talk to you about ANSTO's and some of Australia's progress in the management of low and intermediate level radioactive wastes. Radioactive waste can be a polarising subject, and it's certainly juxtaposed against the overwhelming benefits that come from nuclear, nuclear medicine, saving lives, nuclear for industry, and certainly nuclear power, as we've discussed a lot today. The waste aspects from all of the benefits of nuclear, however, remains a challenge. And today, this is still from both a societal factor and also a technical aspect. And I'll spend some time today looking at the current landscape. But first, I guess, the question is, what actually is progress when it comes to radioactive waste management? Progress can look like a lot of things, and is all progress actually good? Even by definition, there are really two ways that you can attack it. Progress by moving forward towards a destination, or moving forward like walking along a path that you're already on, to a place that you know you want to go. Taking conscientious steps in the right direction. Maybe there are better paths, but you have the direction in your sight. Or progress by developing towards an improved or a more advanced condition. For radioactive waste, that is making it safer, understanding the waste better, making better plans, being in a better position, but not necessarily linked to your destination. And this is like you're frolicking in the ocean and all of a sudden you see a shark. You swim to the nearest island that you can get to get away from the danger. Are you better off? Of course you are, but you're not necessarily where you want to be or any closer to where you want to be. We have many examples of this in radioactive waste management, whether it be something like the Little Forest Legacy site that we have, where we buried radioactive wastes and other wastes in trenches in the 1960s, or even drum drying liquid waste to a solid form, knowing that it's easier and safer to manage, but it's not a final solution and probably will introduce different challenges of its own in future. And Australia has spent a long time in the space where the destination is completely unknown, resulting in different kinds of progress from each column. And ultimately, sometimes we've been faced with the question, do we want to get better or do we just want to get by? However, happily, Australia has never been as close as we are today in the designation of a Commonwealth facility for disposal, and that is for low-level waste disposal, and that is our final destination. Particularly in the last 3 years, as Minister Gillespie discussed earlier today, we have rapidly progressed progress there, and the government has formed the Australian Radioactive Waste Agency. They have finalised the site selection process for National Radioactive Waste Management Facility and even gained over 60% of the local community approval for the preferred site. And that site was then acquired in November last year in Kimba, South Australia. And we also now have an interim destination for ILW, with the NRWMF mandated to be a longer-term store for ILW while a disposal solution is identified. However, though, as we continue this journey, there are still key components that critically feed into waste conditioning and planning, and these are still to be worked through. So to account for all of these unknowns, ANSTO has developed a strategy and a radioactive waste management strategy in consideration of both of these arms of progress, safe management of radioactive wastes, but also in consideration of future potential disposal plans. And the strategy that we have developed is underpinned by 10 key guiding principles. These have been developed in consideration of ANSTO's purpose, the current federal government mandate for the NRWMF, our risk appetite, guidelines, international best practice, and above all, these principles start with reduction of waste through minimisation. Next, that we will store and manage waste in a way that will keep people and the environment safe, that we will always analyse options for managing waste, that we will enable and support Australia by using our skills, our facilities and our expertise and resources to support other organisations in managing their waste. Certainly, we have a spent fuel program where we send our spent fuel overseas for reprocessing and then receive back the spent fuel residues. We have 2 key principles relating to the government mandate for the NRWMF, and most importantly, that we will use our strengths and intellectual property and research and development in radioactive waste to continue to reduce risks for future generations, and that we will make no regrets decisions, which is my favourite, as it's also lends to the key point of not having any more problems for future generations to deal with. And finally, we must keep a continuous improvement mindset and review and improve considering emerging practices and technologies and local drivers. These principles, taken with 6 primary planning and prioritisation considerations, guide business planning and decision making in all aspects of radioactive waste at ANSTO. And there's a good reason that we have to have such a robust and defendable strategy. We have a lot of different wastes of different kinds and quite substantial volumes. The accumulation over the last almost 70 years of operation has resulted in almost 9,200 litre drums of low-level waste, a variety of miscellaneous, remote or intermediate level solid wastes stored in almost 1,500 aluminium retrievable bins, and our radioactive liquid wastes are in excess of 60,000 litres currently. And this is amongst all of our other bespoke wastes that we have from all of our diverse operations, research, medicine production, and of course the operation of our reactors. In fact, we've identified over 200 different bespoke legacy wastes, and each need a considered and potentially different solution. And for the reasons that we've called them contact handled and remote handled waste here instead of low and intermediate, is that because at this stage, many of our wastes are legacy and they lack really good characterisation data for us to be able to split them into the 2 groups. And of course, intermediate and low level waste will be defined by AWA in future. So when you look at this compared to the inventory data from the 2018 Australian Radioactive Waste Management Framework released by DISA, ANSTO leads the way in both current and future low and intermediate level waste generation. Since this data was generated, however, CSIRO in particular have undertaken characterisation activities of the 10,000 drums of what was perceived to be low-level waste at the Woomera site. And that's reduced the actual volume now down to closer to 200 drums. ANSTO, as well, has embarked on our own characterisation campaign. Early results of that are very promising. We have looked at 10% of the intermediate level waste that we store in the aluminium retrievable bins, and that has shown that only 15% of that had a dose rate that put it into the intermediate level waste category. Now, this was a targeted campaign. I'm not going to pretend that that's going to be uniform across the rest of our waste streams, but I think it's a significant impact on the way that characterisation will have on the national inventory, and also help us understand the magnitude of the problem and conditioning activities that will be required to be NRWMF suitable. So when it comes to how we're actually managing our wastes, ANSTO will use super compaction, overpacking and grouting to condition our low-level wastes that are currently in the 200 litre drums for disposal at the NRWMF. This is in line with our no regrets mindset and a lack of a destination. Until recently, we have not started this super compaction despite the installation being complete some years ago. However, we are conscious that our low-level waste storage capacity will be exhausted by 2030. So we have turned our attention to getting our super compactor hot commissioned this year, and our grout plant, we will begin construction towards the middle of this decade. As you can see, the volume reduction is quite significant, even when compacting demolition materials like a concrete or a tile. Once the NRWMF waste acceptance criteria is determined, we will then also be able to determine suitable overpacks and grouts and really progress the conditioning of our low-level waste to be ready for when the NRWMF is opened. Now, we heard from my colleague Rowan earlier in this session to talk about the Synrock processing plant under construction at ANSTO, so I won't spend any more time on this except to say that the applicability of Synrock technologies on many of our liquid waste challenges is very exciting, and we anticipate its widespread implementation at ANSTO over the coming decade and beyond. I guess one of the benefits of having lots of different waste streams is that you get to do a lot of cool research and technology development, so it's one area that we're very excited about. With the operation of our Synrock plant, though, we will also then have increased volumes of intermediate level waste. And that in conjunction with nuclear medicine operations, we anticipate that we will run out of storage for that, for our aluminium retrievable bins, our SUF storage vessels and those Synrock cans by about 2027. It's getting quite close. We approached the federal government for funding for a new storage facility to ensure that we had ongoing capacity, and we received $60 million this year for that facility, and we're on track now to have that new storage-only facility operational prior to reaching capacity, and it will provide at least an additional 10 years of storage. As the waste acceptance criteria develops and we understand our legacy ILW better, we'll be able to then inform the kind of conditioning facility that we will require for us to condition our waste so that it is ready for the NRWMF and future disposal, which will be our next step. ANSTO reached an incredible milestone last month, you may have seen in the news. The last of the HIFAR spent fuel sent overseas for reprocessing returned to Australia as vitrified residues contained within a DN81 dual transport and storage container. This was the culmination of years of planning by state and federal agencies to ensure that Australia safely meets its international obligation. And it has now joined the first TN81 that arrived back at ANSTO in 2015 from France. It was an incredibly successful operation due to the diligent planning, and it involved approximately 250 police. And despite media reporting on the arrival of the canister, including the time that the ship was going to dock in the port, we were very thankful that we had no protesters. We saw nothing, not at the port, not at ANSTO, not along the route. We heard there were some in South Australia potentially at the NRWMF site, but really I think this is significant of the advance that we have had in society for the acceptance of the benefits of nuclear and that we are required to appropriately disposition our radioactive waste. Now our focus is continuing on the Opal spent fuel shipments to France that will occur over the next 40 years. This will result in a further 3 TN81s of vitrified residues returning to Australia in around 2035, 2055 and 2075. To me, only 5 TN81 canisters in total for over 100 years of reactor operations I think is pretty good. And now turning a little bit towards operationally what we're doing on site at ANSTO. In terms of new technologies to support our minimisation principles, the introduction of laser ablation to our decontamination suite will provide operational and safety efficiencies in our day-to-day waste activities. By removing the surface layer of contamination, we can reuse materials, reduce waste volumes, and I'm really excited that we will have this up and running and operational this year. And finally, as I wrap up today, while I have shown just a few ways in which we have made significant progress in both of the arms, there too remains many challenges that need to be addressed, and I've captured a few of the most front of mind ones for me here. The waste acceptance criteria for the NRWMF, the intermediate level waste disposal pathway still remains unknown, although there's been significant work and thought and collaboration on borehole disposal in Australia. The new waste streams that will be generated from new activities, we've talked about the nuclear-powered submarines today, as well as a potential nuclear power future, and our decommissioning liabilities that remain. These are pieces of the puzzle that we will need to put together in order to support the long-term management of low and intermediate level waste in Australia. And thank you for your time.